I can't spoiler alert it, but basically my character gets into a sort of a panic frenzy and there's a big change. It's a big pivotal change in the movie. The movie really holds on understanding the character's emotional distress in making this big decision for this, act two into act three kind of climax change.
Welcome everyone to this exciting interview segment at Throughout the Shows. I'm Desmira, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Eric Hicks, star of the Lifetime movie You're Taken. Join us as we delve into Eric's insight into his character and the challenges of filming this movie. Thank you for being here with us, Eric.
Yeah, real pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, Desiree. Yeah.
For me, and so Barry's role in Girl Taken straddles the line between family, friends, and captor. How did you approach embodying the moral ambiguity?
Yeah, the moral ambiguity, in the starting with the audition process, when I got the sides, I saw that there was an opportunity to play the character where he was trying to create a win-win situation for everybody. A lot of the times in life, our our intent is altruistic. We're trying to make the best of a situation with the tools that we have at hand. And so with approaching Perry, I really wanted to have in his heart this willingness to do the best that he can do to try to make everybody happy around him. But then the circumstances of the story, lead things down different ways and conflict ensues. You don't have a story without conflict. But with the moral ambiguity, I just really wanted to play it with a sincere heart to do the best. And it's just sometimes in life we get put in circumstances where you get tested in ways and you have to make a choice. And that choice is what reveals the true character of who we are. And so the script is already written in the choice that they make, but I really wanted to play against the choices. And so, when the movie starts out, you see someone, I come from a small town and I can relate to this like backwoods kind of small town mentality. And so you see a really approachable, lovable, like introduction to the character. And I think that's the core of who he really is. And so I really tried to weave that theme through the whole film. And then circumstances lead you down a different pathway and you just deal with those in the moment. But yeah, altruism at the core, trying to make a win-win situation. And you don't usually, yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna zip my mouth. No
It's an
spoiler alert.
interesting point of view, yes. And what specific research or preparation did you undertake to portray Paris' psychological complexity?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is when I'm approaching characters, you have to find the heart of the character. And that's always the hardest part. And so for me, I needed to find his pain. I needed to find the hurt within him. And I found it in Perry's a lone wolf. I really I wanted to find an animal for Perry. And so I actually settled on a hyena, something who's really playful. And I watched a bunch of documentaries on hyenas. And I'm like, oh, fascinating, like really beautiful. Really, they love family and community and they stick together and they're very playful, but they're playful in a mischievous kind of way. But they're very loving and tender and you don't see that side. When we talk about hyenas, you think vicious but there's a really soft undercurrent there. And so I just put that in my mind and in my bones and in my body and really tried to embody the life of a hyena.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works so well. But then I found that he's a hyena without a tribe. He has no family, he doesn't have a lot of friends. in the movie, his best friend Kyle, who is Rose's dad. I used to work with this guy, Kyle, and he passes away, a couple years prior, and he was my best friend. And so, you know, I have a very small resource of social community
Yeah.
at the stage when the movie starts. And so it's like, that gets to anybody when you don't have a community or someone to support you and uplift you, and it's easy to go into a heavier headspace, but you still try to make the best of life and you try to support others, and so that's what he does. I'm dating some Danny who's 6 months pregnant, and we're about to start a new life together and enter a new chapter in our lives. And so for me, I had to link myself in, and I just had to imagine that my dad passed away, and saying goodbye to my dad forever is like there's so much love with my father that the amount of loneliness and just like desolation, just what's the point? Family's so much for me. And so I just imagined that, I didn't have my father around. And it just broke my heart. And that allowed me to understand the type of pain and mind frame from where Perry was coming from. And it really locked in that character. It really helped me ground out and yeah, get to the core of it. And it translated really well. So I was happy with that little discovery. Yeah, because you never know what it's gonna be. Yeah, but
That's
family.
fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it really, yeah, you just learn to play. I find like the more you act, the more you learn to like get outside the regular lines of comfort that we structure our lives around, and you're like you leave a little opportunity for surprises. And so I just allowed myself to make discoveries as the process went and made sure that I didn't fall into old habits of, that comfort and security of like, I have a process to prepare. And so you're always just trying new things and praying to God that something works in the moment on the day. And sometimes it really does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And talking about on-set dynamics,
Mhm.
how did you build chemistry and tension with Erica Durance, your co-star, across emotionally intense scenes?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I've been a huge, stupidly huge fan of Erica's. I watched Saving Hope, and I watched every episode of that series, and her acting is like it's just so emotionally loaded and heavy that it makes you can't help but cry. And Michael Shanks, her co-star, also delivered. But it shows like that, and like, have you ever watched This Is Us?
Yes.
Yeah, like I love family, anything that like pulls on your heartstrings. Like This Is Us, every episode, I would be weeping.
Yeah.
I love that. So, anyways, Erica with Saving Hope had that effect on me. And it just so happened that one of my best friends was also hanging out with Erica in their own like, private time. And so we were talking about Erica a lot before I even auditioned for this film. And when I booked the film, I called up my buddy and I'm like, yo, you'll never believe who I'm co-starring with. And he's like, Erica. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, how'd you guess? And so right away, when I met Erica, my buddy had already talked to her about it. And so we had this really familial, kind of easy going relationship to start with, a nice comfort. And so just driving in the set vehicle where they pick you up and drive you to set, we developed a nice easygoing rapport and a trust. And so it was just really relaxed, really comfortable. We're both actors who have been in this game for a long time. And so, we understand the process, and there was just a certain level of um a playfulness with us where we didn't take it too seriously and we just kind of really had fun with it. And when we made mistakes, we'd be like, oh, laugh about them, be like, okay, like let's go again. And, it just had a really lightness to it, which oddly enough allows you to feel safe enough to take risks. And so Erica's such a pro, you can kind of lean back on your heels and let Erica take the reins. And yeah, I was happy to let her lead the way, and I just followed along with her beat by beat. And some of the scenes that we did, um, there's just a really beautiful tension and underlying tension through it. And she doesn't miss beats. Like she's really good at observing you. And so when you throw her a curveball, she picks up on it and she catches it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, she's not letting moments slide. I'm like, and that's when acting is really fun. When your co-star is playing ball with you and you're just like you're hitting that ball back and forth and it's just like, ooh, it's delicious. And then, I remember the first scene we did together, you could hear on the comms someone was saying, and they told us, they relayed the information back. They're like, the footage was getting sent out already, and they're like, they love it. They're like, you two are fucking like, oops, you're doing a great job, and it's really landing, and it's hitting the mark. Like the story's coming across clear, and I was like, oh, good. And so to start off with that kind of like, it's syncing up. That's when it's like, oh, good, it's gonna work. So yeah, we had fun. We had fun. Erica's a sweetheart. So and,
That's amazing.
yeah, such a dream. You just pinch yourself. I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, I'm getting to start with Erica. I'm like, wow. Yeah, pretty lucky. So very
I
grateful.
can imagine.
Hmm.
And talking about directorial collaboration,
Yeah.
what was the director's vision for Perry, and how did you integrate your own interpretation into that framework?
Yeah, great question. These movies, these Lifetime movies, they film so fast. So you don't have a lot of time to think when the filming starts. You really have to do all your prep work ahead of time. And the thing is the script was good, but the dialogue needed a little finessing in the moment. So Paula hired on her friend, who's a script supervisor, and together they would change dialogue as we filmed it. And it just so happened that all of the notes that I took on my script for my character, I came up with ideas for like script changes, like dialogue changes, and they were exactly the same as Paula and the script supervisor's notes. And so we were just everything they suggested, I'm like, yeah, like that's exactly what I was thinking. Or anything I would say, they're like, yeah, let's do that. And so for us, we were just aligned right from the get-go. And Paula, I remember we did this first scene, and it was I was driving in a truck with the character Rose, played by Kennedy Rowe, and Paula has worked with Kennedy before, so they had a nice communication and a comfort around each other. And after, we shot Kennedy's footage first, and then when we flipped the cameras around to shoot my coverage, after my first take, Paula's like, "Oh my God, Eric." She's like, "You're so fun to watch." She's like, "Oh, that was great." And so like right away, she really enjoyed watching me do my thing. And so she didn't have to get in there to direct me a whole lot, except for when I missed the mark or she needed specific moments. And she'd just be straight with me. She'd just be like, Eric, this moment, you're doing this. I need this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, 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 of course. And I would just make the change and she'd be like, great, moving on. And so it was just really quick shorthand. But the thing is I loved working with Paula because she gave me the freedom to play. She gave me the freedom to make mistakes, to make my own choices, to fall on my ass, to be the weirdo that I am. And some of the scenes she's like, "Oh, she's like you're tapping into your McConaughey." And I'm like finding that like charm and then sometimes she's like, "Whoa." She's like, "That was intense." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Let me know if it's too much." But she's like, "No, it's great." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Good." So it just, it was one of those relationships where she was an actress before she became a director. And so Paula understands the shorthand talk of talking with actors and even watching her help other actors. I remember seeing her do a line reading for another actress once, and I was like, Paula, I'm like, you should be filming this scene. I'm like, that was really good. Like, she's a great actress too. And so, when there's a mutual respect like that, it's just everything goes really smoothly. And it was just so fun. She's quick. She's quick. I'm quick. The script supervisor was quick, and together, the triage of that made it really fun because you weren't tied down to word perfect script, even though we were word perfect still, but we would add in lines, add in little things here and there, and then we would execute it, and it worked really well. And so, yeah, it was really nice, really satisfying. You don't get that all the time, and that was a treat. Yeah,
Great.
Paul is awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
And talking about the challenging scene on this set, which moment in filming Girl Taken tested you the most, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. There's, I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but there was, because it shoots so fast, you don't have a lot of time to prep each scene to get to that place mentally where you need to be. But there was one scene where I can't spoiler alert it, but basically my character gets into a sort of a panic frenzy, and there's a big change. It's a big pivotal change in the movie. The movie really holds on understanding the character's emotional distress in making this big decision for this, act two into act three kind of climax change. And have you ever heard of breath work?
Yeah, yes, yes,
Breath work. It's like you can take workshops on like deep inhaling, deep exhaling at different
yeah,
tempos, and you can get your body worked up into a certain frenzied state where you have your emotions open up and you can just start crying, like weeping out of nowhere. And so before I started the scene, Paula gave me like one last take. And she's like, okay, we got it. Now you can do whatever you want. And I just started doing some breath work right there. And as I exhaled, all of this emotion just came to the surface. And it just put me in a state of distress where, I wasn't sure how to handle all of this energy. And that was exactly the place where the character was in. And this was just one of those godsends where it was a gift. It was something that you can't really count on happening, but in the moment, it just was there. And I rode the wave of that breath emotion. And I just rode that wave throughout the scene. And there were so many colors to the scene because of that. And I remember the scene ended with me upstairs in my house. And there's another actress, Shireen Haas, who plays the detective in the show. And she was upstairs in holding in a room. And she comes into the room where I was in my separate holding. And she says, that was intense. She's like, how did you do that? There were so many colors in that. Like she could hear it. She's like, there were so many colors. She's like, how did you do that? And then I told her, I also had a little secret as I listened. I have a playlist of really sad music. And I did that. And I just imagined my dad as well. I imagined saying goodbye to my dad for the last time. And that just kind of made all the emotion come up to the surface. And then once it was on the surface, I threw it away. And then when I went downstairs to start the scene, I did that breathing and that brought the emotion right to the surface. And then I just rode the wave. And when I explained that to her, she's just like, okay. She's like, that makes sense. Okay. But she was just like so blown away and taken by, when the emotions really flow and all the different colors that come out of you. And it's moment by moment by moment by moment. So throughout the scene, there's all these shifts because you're just riding it moment by moment. You're not getting ahead of yourself. You're not like executing a pre-planned decision. You're just, letting the scene unravel in the moment. And it's so hard to do that as an actor. That's the mastery of the craft. But, as it happened, it's just like it worked. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Because it needed to work for the character's arc to really make sense. We needed to see him in distress. And yeah, thank God.
yeah.
Sometimes you just count your blessings. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Your
Yeah.
point of view and these sides of your work. It's really
Mm.
fascinating.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's a fascinating job for sure. To have to discover these sides of yourself as well. It's one of those professions where you need to get outside the comfort zone continually. And you know how much we love living in our own bubbles of security and stability. It's terrifying to get outside the comfort zone, but that's where all the growth happens. So
yeah,
sometimes you got to take the leap and yeah, fall on your ass most often, but sometimes it works.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And talking about emotional stakes,
Mhm.
how did you maintain mental and emotional balance after shooting scenes depicting abduction and survival horror?
Yeah, I actually, at one point, the emotion was so heavy that I asked one of the guys on set for a cigarette, and he gave me two cigarettes, and I'm like, I just needed something to just, like, get the emotion off out of me. I just needed something to wash it away. And it can just be anything like that. But every night at the hotel they put me in, there was a hot tub that was outdoors. And so
Yeah.
every single night, that was my routine. I would come back to the hotel, I would study my script for a couple hours again for the next day's shooting, and then I would go in the hot tub and just wash all of the emotion away, recalibrate, and then I would just sit there and look up at the stars, and I would just let all that information of that script analysis for the next day and like the stuff we had already shot, trying to weave it all together. And ideas just come to you when you're that relaxed and you're outdoors and you're looking up at the sky. All these beautiful creative ideas keep coming to you. So each night I was able to just like wash away all the tension and then have these new ideas come, and then I would show up fresh to set each day and then just build up all this heavy emotion and then go back and wash it off and just repeated that again and again and again. And then, you get a weekend and you're like, you really make sure to take care of yourself and stretch and meditate and go to the gym and things like that are big help. But meditation is always like the number one grounding force. I've done a couple of those Vipassana 10-day silent meditation retreats, and it just gives you a skill set like to when you're getting overwhelmed or emotionally just, there's a lot on the surface that wants to come out. It just gives you a way to recalibrate your nervous system. And so I have that as a tool as well. And it comes in very handy as an actor. So, yeah, for anybody,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
meditation.
nice.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
hot tubs. Yeah.
Nice,
Without a
nice.
hot tub, I would just have a bath every night, that hot water, something about that just soothes the nervous system.
Yeah.
But you'd need that. You need that for sure. Yeah, I remember hearing what's his Andrew Garfield, you know that actor?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Spider-Man and all. Yeah. He did this TV series playing a Mormon. I haven't watched it. I auditioned for the show, but it was extremely emotionally taxing for him. And I remember listening to a little talk he had after about his work on that, and he did the same thing. He would go to this spa every single night after work, and he would wash all the emotion. I'm like, I'm gonna, yeah, keep that in mind. And so it works.
This is
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah. Yeah, it works.
And talking about real impact, did playing such a dark character influence your perspective on real world issues of trust and safety?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, one of the biggest things for me, because you have to relate to things personally. I come from a very secure, stable, small town of 1,500 people in Saskatchewan. And I mean, the mayor of the town was my second cousin, and he was also my history teacher. You don't lock your doors at night. So I grew up very trustworthy and very naive. Now, when I moved to Toronto, I got tricked. I got taken advantage of a bunch of times by people who saw this fresh face who doesn't know much, and people took advantage of me. I was just too trustworthy. And so the thing I took from that is the reason I got tricked is because they had a smile on their face and they shook my hand and they said all the right things, and I didn't pick up, I didn't trust my intuition at the time. I didn't know how to listen to my gut feeling, and it's taken a long time in my life to pick up on that. And so as far as this film goes, it's the same premises. It's you really, manipulation happens under the surface a lot of the time, but our intuition will always pick up on that. It's just whether or not we listen to it or not, because it's so subtle and we're like, ah, nah, I'm just in my head and I'm just overreacting. I'm like, no, you're probably not. You're probably actually picking up on something that's telling you to, hey, spidey senses alert, get out of the situation. It's okay to say no, but we're so polite as humans that we don't want to offend other people, especially in Canada. We're hyper polite. And so approaching this role, I really wanted to bring in that essence of people who had, you know, given me that life lesson. And I wanted to bring that into Perry as well, where it's like, and you might not even be aware that you're manipulating somebody. It might just be an old habit or pattern from childhood that you're not aware of. And so to be altruistic in your mind, to think that you're actually helping somebody, to think that, and it comes off very charming and very endearing, and it drops people's defenses down. And that, and it's usually done with a loving attentiveness too. And so it's so disarming to other people that they can fall into your trap and just say yes. And that's a lot of what happens in this film. So for the audience, you're going to pick up on a lot of these subtleties and you're going to have these reflections in your own life. And it's going to, walking away from this movie is going to leave you being a little more hyper aware of your spidey senses tingling and being like, ah, right, right. That type of behavior that appears on the surface so charming can actually be Machiavellian in nature and be very narcissistic and manipulative. And there's so many different types of narcissism out there that it's hard for people to know, how to navigate that. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of elements of that in this movie specifically. And I hope the audience picks up on that and takes away, listen to your intuition. It is so much smarter than you could ever imagine. And yeah, keep sharp. I mean, really, we're so much more dialed in and intuitive than we ever could imagine. And you really just have to trust your spidey senses, as Andrew Garfield would agree.
Yes. So, change of subject.
Yeah, right on.
Thinking
Great
about,
question, by the way.
thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. And your smart answers.
Well, yeah, you live it, so you know it. Yeah.
So, change of subject. Talking about your career in general, I would like to know. Um, you have worked in thrillers, crime drama, and romance. How
Hmm.
do you adapt your approach across genres?
Hmm. Well, there's been a lot of failure, a lot of mistakes. But I think the biggest thing for me is I've taken stupid amounts of acting classes. Like, I really dedicated a decade of my life to do nothing but take acting classes all the time, like two or three classes simultaneously, like all year round, year after year after year. And when you take acting classes, the thing is you're doing scenes from pieces that are so far outside yourself constantly. You're stretching yourself in every direction over and over and over again. And so you learn to fail in every direction over and over and over again. And over time, a long time of failing, you start to learn to kind of hone it in of what the subtleties are. But I think at the core of it all is you have to try to get to the truth, whether it's a drama or a comedy or romance, you have to get to the heart of the character. And so that's the thread throughout. Find the heart of the character, find the truth. But I think I've made a mistake in the past of approaching roles trying to make scenes more than what they are. So I try to make things higher stakes than what they are because in acting class you're doing one scene and you make a whole meal out of that scene. Maybe that scene is as casual as you and I having a conversation right now, but maybe I try to make it like Macbeth. I'm making it like, there's three witches and I'm making the stakes so high and it's almost I make it too big of stakes sometimes. And so I've made that mistake a few times in a couple movies. And so with this movie, I wanted to make sure not to make that mistake. I wanted to make sure to like really bring a relaxed version of myself to set and have that little charm and that personality kind of come through that you're a real full-fledged human being. And so when I go into romance, you know, it's just the script is different circumstances, but I'm realizing more and more that I just have to keep bringing a heart open version of myself time and time again. And if I'm doing a drama, it's a heart open version of myself, just different circumstances, or a thriller, same thing, just different circumstances. I just have to open the heart and bring myself and then make sure that I'm acting opposite somebody else. But you just have to have a need. Like, what is your need? What is your want in that scene? What do I hope that you do by the end of the scene? And as the scene goes on, I'm like, am I getting what I want or not? And that's kind of it. It's the same principles in all genres, but it's just with comedy, the pacing is a lot sharper, the timing is really important. There's a musicality to every genre that you shoot. And a lot of the times I explain it to people in the same way that a musician, you have an orchestra, you have all these different instruments. It's no different than mastering a guitar versus mastering a violin. They're different genres. So you have to learn to master each genre separately. But once you learn one genre, it's a little easier to learn another genre because you've learned how to sheet read the music or analyze the script. And so you learn the narrative of life, which, story, it's the narrative of life. And so over time, it just gets easier to break down scripts and stories and understand the human narrative of the journey of life. And then you got to learn the new instrument. And so that's it. You're just trying to learn as many different instruments as you can, and then you're like, okay, in this scene, this is a Mozart piece, or in this scene, this is a fast tempo, like this is a hardcore, screamo song. You really got to find that the music of the scene and the pacing and the rhythm and the tempo and the volume and really it's very masterful. It's very specific. And I think specificity is key as an artist. In the same way a musician, you can play the same notes that that song has, but you can bring your own little flair to it, your own feeling to the chords, the way you play the notes, and it comes out sounding different because it comes through you. And so other actors could have played Perry. We'd all play the same notes, but it's going to come out different through different instruments. And so I just need to play my instrument, play those notes with my instrument, and just have an open heart. And that's kind of it. Yeah, it's really tricky though. It's
Yeah,
a masterful little art form. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. It
So,
sounds like you might become an actress after this. You're like, ah, I get it.
yeah,
I will do this. Yes.
yeah. So, this is it. Make sure all of you to coach Girl Taken this Sunday night on Lifetime Channel. And thank you, Eric, to join us today.
Thanks a lot, Desiree. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was a great chatting with you. Great
Real.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try to do my best, and I'm really curious about your insight deep of your work.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, you're a great listener. And the background around your face is just, Christmas vibes. I love this.
Thank you.
Very, very homey, very homey. I love it.
Thank you. And thank you again. And thank
Yeah.
you all for watching. Bye.